Winter, 1944. The wind clawed at the wooden shutters of a crumbling farmhouse, half buried in snow near the edge of the forest. Inside, by the weak light of a kerosene lamp, a young woman stood barefoot on the cold floor, her pale slip clinging to her skin. Her hands folded a tiny wool undershirt, worn soft by washing, still damp. Beside it, a torn soldier's jacket lay draped over a chair, one button missing. It seemed blackened with soot and sweat. She looked at the baby in her arms, quiet, blinking, with tufts of blonde hair and eyes like winter glass. Her breath hitched. She traced the child's eyelash with the back of her finger, then held him close against her chest. Her lips brushed his forehead. "Forgive me," she whispered, trembling. A floorboard groaned upstairs. Outside, a dog barked once and fell silent. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Memory had already opened the door. Europe lay hollowed out, like a shell echoing with footsteps that didn't belong. Smoke rose where cathedrals once stood, rivers ran black with oil and rumor, and the trains no longer whistled. They groaned. In the frostbitten arms of the Vosges forest, the village of St. Leone slept with one eye open. German flags hung from broken chimneys. Windows stayed shuttered, not to keep out the cold, but to keep in the shame. The manor on the hill, once the estate of a wine baron, now housed a Wehrmacht. Officers slept in satin beds beneath stained portraits of French nobility. They walked with polished boots through muddy streets, nodding at no one. The local men had vanished months ago. Some fled. Some resisted. Some were taken. What remained were the women, stooping, silent, thin. They stirred soup without meat, scrubbed sheets that weren't theirs, washed blood from tile floors, and said thank you when soldiers passed. At the center of the occupation was a hospice, converted into a medical outpost. Its walls smelled of iodine, steam, and memory. Hey, the wounded came not to heal, but to be reproposed. Limps were measured, scars ignored, nerves studied for future use. Among them was Oberleutnant Jacob Rayner. He arrived limping, face pale, eyes unreadable. Not young, not old. Silver scars crossed the ridge of his brow like a map to somewhere forgotten. His fingers were always inked, as if the war wrote itself into his veins. They called him the philosopher not out of mockery, but unease. He read books. He said nothing. He watched. Rayner's presence didn't command rooms. It haunted them. He moved like someone who had already seen the worst and decided not to flinch again. Margot Lemoyne noticed him on the third morning. She poured water over his bandages without looking up. He thanked her without looking down. She was 23. Her apron was always clean, her voice always soft, her eyes always tired. Her husband, Henri, had kissed her once beside the town well before disappearing into fog 7 months ago. He was a courier for the resistance, or a ghost. No one said his name anymore, not even her. But she still tied her hair back with the same blue ribbon he loved. That was enough to keep him alive. Margot did not hate the Germans. She didn't have the energy. She hated how quiet everything had become. Even the children had stopped asking questions. Twice a week, she carried baskets of boiled linen through the snow to the manor. There, she wiped up blood from the tiled stays and refilled candles in rooms where no one slept. She did not look the officers in the eyes, except for Jacob. He didn't lie. He didn't smile. He simply watched, like someone waiting for a wound to open on its own. The town square was gutted. The chapel burned. Bells had not rung in months. Time moved by the scraping of shovels and the closing of shutters. The air itself had become obedient. In St. Leone, war wasn't loud. It pressed into your mouth when you spoke. It turned bread to paper. It taught women how to breathe without trembling. Something was coming. Everyone felt it. No one said it. Each morning, before the frost melted off the window panes, Margot walked the same path through the manor. Her boots whispered across the stone floors. Her eyes stayed low. The ribbon in her hair, one sky blue, now dull with age and dust, remained knotted precisely the way Henri had tied it on their wedding night, as if it might hold him in place, wherever he was. She moved past the officers without flinching. Their eyes followed her hips, her hands, her silence. Some murmured in German. She understood enough to know what they meant, and ignored enough to pretend she didn't. But Jacob Rayner never spoke, never followed, never touched. He sat alone at a long table near the back of the common hall, always with paper and pen, his left hand steady while the right curled slightly. Damaged nerve, they said, from Monte Cassino. His handwriting was delicate, too delicate for orders. In the margins of his requisition reports, she once saw a line in German inked with care. Every silence is a story screaming. She never asked what it meant. She never asked anything. In the dormitory, younger soldiers fidgeted in their cots like schoolboys too long indoors. Fritz, barely 19, twitched in his sleep and whimpered for his mother. She gave him an extra blanket once. He didn't thank her. The next morning, he tried to give her chocolate from his rations. She refused. Sister Agnes moved through the halls like smoke, everywhere, unseen until she wasn't. Her eyes watched everything. Her silence wasn't ignorance. It was endurance. She tended the chapel ruins with the same care she gave to the bandaged man. She prayed without hope, but never without rhythm. And then there was Clemence, freckled, thin-voiced, eyes too round for her own good. Margot's oldest friend, now a washerwoman by day, a whisper collector by night. She told Margot the girls from nearby towns, the ones who didn't come home after being summoned to serve, upstays. Clemence spoke in cracked laughter, but her fingers always shook. "They haven't touched you yet," she once said, eyes narrowed. "Why?" Margot didn't answer. She didn't need to. They hadn't touched her because she made herself invisible. Because she walked like a widow and kept her mouth as tight as a sheet she washed. Because she never made noise, never lingered, never invited, until the night she forgot to close the infirmary door all the way. Until the night she returned for a dropped scarf and found Jacob Rayner at the edge of the candlelight, sketching. He was drawing her. Not her body, her profile, her eyes, the shape of her lips, half-parted in thought. His pencil paused as she stepped inside. His eyes rose to meet hers. They didn't flicker. They just stayed. She stood there, unmoving, then turned, walked out, and left the door unlocked. The infirmary was quieter after dusk. Oil lamps cast long shadows on stone walls, and the scent of boiled goals and firewood hung in the air. Margot knelt beside Jacob's cot, rewrapping the bandage on his shoulder. His shirt lay folded, his skin pale against the dark wool blanket. Her fingers moved with practiced care, clean, tuck, tighten. But when her hand reached for the last strip of linen, his moved too. Their knuckles met. The contact was brief, a whisper of skin against skin. He didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. As she leaned closer to secure the bandage, it slipped. The edge of the cloth unraveled, revealing the scar just below his ribs, long, pink, jagged like a question never answered. He inhaled sharply, but not from pain. His eyes opened to meet hers. She wasn't staring at the wound. She was studying the place it lived. She paused. For a moment, the war ceased. No shouting, no commands, only skin and silence. Later that night, while replacing the linen rolls in the supply cabinet, she found something folded between the gauze, a slip of paper torn from a medical log, ink faded but legible. A body is not owned, only remembered by the one who undresses it. She read it once, then tucked it inside her apron pocket without a word. The next evening, Jacob sat near the cast-iron stove in the corner of the sleeping quarters. He was reading, or pretending to. The room smelled of ash and soap. Margot entered, removed her coat, then her boots. She turned her back to him and began to unbutton her dress. The cloth slid from her shoulders with a sigh. She wore only her slip beneath, a simple, off-white piece fraying at the hem. The candlelight danced across her back, tracing her spine like a map of forgotten warmth. She didn't speak. She didn't tone. She stood at the wash basin and began rinsing out a cloth with slow, deliberate rhythm. She heard it, the pause in his breath, the sound of paper closing, the slight creak of the floorboard beneath his chair. But he did not move. Outside, the snow kept falling. She slept that night without dreaming. The next afternoon, she hauled buckets of boiled snow to the barn. The converted stable was now used for washing, the only place left where the steam could rise without judgment. She set the basin near the lantern, undressed with the same calm precision she applied to stitches and sutures. She poured the water slowly, letting it run over her thighs, her hips, her neck. Her hair clung to her cheeks. The cold bit her skin before the warmth soothed it. Behind the partition, she knew he stood, His silhouette was still. Only his breath betrayed him, shallow, caught, restrained. She let the curtain flutter open just enough. A sliver of her thigh in the glow, a curve of her waist. Then she pulled the cloth close again. He did not enter. She did not ask him to. That night, the snow pressed against the windows. The wind whispered like someone trying not to wake the house. She stayed behind after lights out, not by accident. She remained seated on the edge of a cot while the others turned. The lamps went dim. Footsteps echoed. One by one, the soldiers retreated. Jacob remained, his book unopened, his hand still. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Minutes passed. Then, finally, he did what she had waited for. Nothing. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer. He looked at her, only that, and whispered, "Do you miss him?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. She looked at her lap, then at him. He's been gone too long to remember. The nights turned longer, not colder. Inside the hospice walls, heat pooled in corners, but Margot couldn't sleep. When she did, the dreams came, slow, smothering things. Jacob's hands, unbuttoning her slip. Jacob's breath behind her ear. The weight of his body. Not forceful, not cruel, just present, undeniable. She would wake with sweat on her neck, the sheets tangled around her knees, and shame pressing into her chest like a fist. She didn't cry. Instead, she dropped to her knees beside the cot, fingers interlaced, head bowed, but her lips didn't form prayers of forgiveness. She didn't ask for her husband's return. She only asked for clarity. Something simple. Something she could hold without breaking. Jacob avoided her now. He sat at meals but never near her. He walked the halls like a shadow cast backward, body present, eyes averted. He spoke only when ordered, nodded when necessary, and kept a cigarette always burning between his fingers, though she'd never seen him finish one. Sometimes she caught him alone, his back to the wall, staring at the folded pages of a medical report. Her husband's name printed in black ink across the top. Patient, Henri Lemoyne. Status, unknown. He shouldn't have had the file. He read it anyway, again and again, as if one day it might say something new. One afternoon, the light low and the hallways quiet, Margot entered the storeroom to gather linens. She noticed the edge of something frayed beneath Jacob's mattress. She pulled it free, blue wool, faded, unraveling at the edges. Henri's scarf. She remembered wrapping it around his neck the day he left. Remembered the way he grinned, said it smelled like bread and salt and her. Jacob stood in the doorway, silent, watching. "I knew who you were before I touched you," he said, voice rough. "He carried your photo in his coat when we caught him." Margot turned slowly, the scarf still in her hands. She looked at him, not with rage, not with sorrow, just breath, her chest rising and falling like someone preparing to disappear. He didn't step closer. He didn't reach for her. "I was transferred before they took him outside," Jacob said. "I don't know what happened. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he's buried. Maybe he's still screaming somewhere the earth can't hear." She didn't speak. She folded the scarf in half, then again, pressed it to her lips. In her mind, she heard Henri's voice, bright, teasing, young. And then Jacob's hands on her hips, firm, reverent, trembling. 2 songs played at once, neither in tune. The wind howled through the shutters, flinging snow against the stone like fists of ice. Inside the manor, everything held its breath. The halls were dim, lit only by the occasional flicker of a dying lamp. Sister Agnes had gone to the church to tend the altar candles, leaving behind only the hush of footsteps that never came. Margot didn't hesitate. Her knuckles did not rap against the wood. She opened Jacob's door and stepped inside, quiet as snowfall. The latch clicked softly behind her as she turned the key. Jacob sat on the edge of his cot, sleeves rolled, boots off, the same book unopened in his lap. He didn't rise. He didn't speak. A single candle burned on the table beside him, its flame swaying like a heartbeat. He looked at her, and she at him. She unbuttoned her coat, set it aside. Then her gloves, one by one, fingers stretched long in the air before falling. Her boots thudded gently to the floor. Still, Jacob didn't move. She reached behind her neck and unhooked the clasp of her dress. The fabric slid off her shoulders, grazing her arms, her hips pooling at her feet. Underneath, nothing. No lace, no slip, only skin, marked by cold and memory. Her breath was shallow, her hands steady. The candlelight painted her in gold and shadow. A bruise on her thigh, a small scar near her navel. Her body told its own history. Jacob swallowed, but said nothing. She took a single step toward him, then another, until she stood directly in front of him, bare and unafraid. He whispered, almost broken, "I don't want to hurt you." Her voice came low, firm, almost sad. "Then don't lie to me while you do." He stood. He reached slowly, his hands lifting to her collarbone, fingertips grazing the hollow like a man reading Braille. His touch was not sure. It trembled, cautious, reverent. She closed her eyes as his palms flattened over her shoulders, sliding down her arms, circling her waist. He bent his forehead to hers. No kiss, just breath shared between mouths not yet open. Their bodies moved with a rhythm of grief, not pleasure, of something stolen, not given. He lifted her gently to the cot. She arched under him, not in surrender, but in search of something she couldn't name. They moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid their skin might shatter. No words, only the creak of the frame, the soft catch of her breath, the stifled groan he buried in her neck, the sound of his belt unfastened with trembling fingers, the press of thighs, the shiver of contact, the stillness that followed. When it ended, neither moved. Margot turned her face to the wall, hair damp against her cheek. Her fingers curled against the pillow. Jacob lay beside her, unmoving, the candle burning low with every second. His eyes stared at the ceiling, as if waiting for it to collapse. The snow had melted into mud by the time her stomach began to round beneath her apron. It came slowly, then all at once, buttons no longer meeting, a tightness in her breath, a weight she couldn't shift. She tied her waist tighter, carried more linens, spoke less. No one asked, not even Clements. They all knew how to stay quiet when something shameful grew. Jacob said nothing. He slept less, smoked more, spent long hours alone in the far room, scratching lines into his notebook, drawing things she never saw. His touch grew softer, as if trying to erase himself from her skin. She let him, but she also watched him, the way his eyes darkened when she placed her hand on her stomach. He never touched it. Then the boy came. Thin, 12, always running. He arrived breathless at the hospice gate with a smudged envelope in hand. Jacob read it once, folded it twice, and slipped it into his coat. "Transfer," he said. "Tomorrow." That night, Margot returned early from the barn. His door was open. He wasn't inside. In the drawer by his bed, she found it, her ribbon, the one Henri had tied in her hair, the one she thought she'd lost the week Jacob arrived. He had kept it, not worn, not hidden, just folded, quietly, like a keepsake that never asked permission to be loved. She didn't cry. She placed it back where she found it. The next morning, the convoy rumbled through town just after dawn. Engine smoke trailed behind the trucks like broken promises. She stood beside the well, arms crossed against cold, her stomach barely visible beneath her coat. Jacob sat in the back of the last truck. He didn't look back. The manor burned 6 months later. The Allies swept through the village like wind through hollow halls. Boots trampled the chapel steps. Rifles fired into empty walls. German uniforms were found in piles, soaked in piss and fear. The war was ending, and with it, the silence that had ruled St. Leone. Margot said nothing. She stood among the ash, the weight inside her now full and undeniable. The child kicked when the bells rang. She pressed her palm to the movement and closed her eyes. A British soldier, clearing rubble near the manor, found a scorched page beneath the floorboard. It was torn at the edges, the ink blurred by heat. It read, "I touched her like a thief, knowing nothing I took was mine." The snow was gone, replaced by wet earth and green things trying to remember how to live. St. Leone breathed again, cautiously, as if afraid it would be punished for healing too soon. The bakery reopened with hollow shelves. Children tiptoed past burnt walls. The church bell was lifted from the mud, cracked but still capable of sound. Margot moved slower now. Her hands swelled in the mornings. Her back ached in the evenings. She no longer bothered with the ribbon. There was no one left to recognize it. When the labor came, it was quiet. No midwife, no prayers, just blood and breath and the photo of Henri clutched in one hand, creased, nearly translucent in the corners from years of folding and unfolding. She held it to her chest between contractions, lips pressed to the faded ink of his smile. The child arrived just before dawn. He didn't cry immediately. He blinked up at her, pale-eyed and calm, as if recognizing her from somewhere older than birth. She did not scream. She did not shout. She cut the cord herself, washed him with boiled rainwater, and wrapped him in linen torn from the hem of her nightdress. He was perfect. His skin soft, his fingers long, his hair the color of ash brushed with gold. No one came. No one asked. Some knew. She named him Luke. Luke means light. He rarely cried. He liked music. He slept with one hand curled into a fist and the other open, always reaching. Jacob never saw him, would never see him. But sometimes, in the curve of Luke's lip or the tilt of his chin, she caught glimpses of something that didn't belong to Henri. Weeks passed. The village mended. Stones were stacked. Windows glazed. The manor remained in ruins. One evening, as Margot carried Luke home from the square, a stranger approached. Tall, weathered, eyes sunken with travel. He removed his cap and asked her name. She did not answer. "I'm his brother," he said. "Henri's." She froze. He held out a satchel, brown leather, stiff with dried blood. No ceremony, no warning. Just placed it at her feet. Inside, a wedding ring still flecked with date, a letter folded 3 times, and a field report stamped with red. Henri had been captured crossing into the woods north of Metz. He resisted. They beat him. He died screaming, shot in the spine, buried without a name. She did not scream, did not faint. She sat on the floor, cradled Luke to her chest, and opened the letter. The ink had bled in the rain, but she could still make out her name. Margot, my breath, some things you feel in the dark, even before they happen. If I don't come back, remember how I held you the night before the train. That was the truth. Everything else is duty. You were my last piece. H. She placed the ring on a ribbon and tied it to Luke's cradle. She did not wear it again. She wept only once. Weeks later, Luke was lying on her lap, staring at the ceiling, cooing at shadows. She reached down to lift him, and he touched her cheek, soft, familiar, as if remembering her before he'd ever seen her. Not Henri's touch. Jacob's. That's when the tears came. Quiet, slow, and without end. The air in St. Leone had changed. New roofs, new paint, new people with short memories. But some ruins were left untouched, reminders in stone that not everything deserved to be rebuilt. The old church stood half-swallowed by ivy, its bell long silent. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing off the broken walls. In the square just beyond, a teenage boy tuned his violin beneath the flickering warmth of a street lamp. Luke, tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of quiet that made people lean in. His bow glided across the strings like breath across skin. Notes rose and fell, not polished, not perfect, but aching with something older than the boy himself. Margot stood a few paces behind, hands clasped in front of her coat. Her hair was pinned up, streaked with gray. She didn't smile, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. Across the street, a man paused. Silver-haired, cane in his left hand, his overcoat too formal for the weather. He leaned slightly to one side, favoring the leg that once held weight and now held memory. He did not speak. He simply watched. Margot saw him before he stepped into the light. Her breath stopped, not from surprise, but from the recognition of something she thought would remain buried. Their eyes met. She didn't blink. She only nodded, slow, measured. He did not return it. Before the second movement began, he was gone. No sound of footsteps, just space where he had been. Luke turned his head, bow resting. "Do you know him?" he asked, brow furrowed. Margot looked at her son, the way his fingers cradled the instrument, the tilt of his jaw, the restraint in his voice. She exhaled. "I once dreamt of him," she said, "before you were born." In war, love does not survive. It is too fragile, too slow. But desire lingers, like rust on steel, soft but permanent, clinging even when the blade has dulled. You can clean it, you can bury it, but it stains. A woman can be loyal when the sun is up, when eyes are watching, when duty wraps around her like an apron. But at night, when silence presses against the walls and hunger makes ghosts of the living, the body speaks a different truth. She did not choose Jacob. The war did. It placed his hand where her husband's once was, gave her silence when she asked for memory. It carved space between shame and need, then filled it with a man who spoke in glances and left her empty in ways she could not name. He was not her husband, but he became her wound. And wounds don't heal clean in wartime. They scar. They throb in the cold. They remind. Intimacy in war is not sin. It is survival. A way to remember you're still alive, still warm, still someone. A whisper against a scream. A borrowed breath before the next loss. Now, the child born of that breath plays violin where prayers once echoed. The bell is gone. The pews are dust. But the music remains. Sometimes, when she listens, she doesn't remember the fire, or the uniforms, or the letter soaked in blood. She remembers the breath on her neck, and the way he never said goodbye.